You think you know the story of Lucifer's fall? The greatest tragedy in the history of creation? Think again. What I'm about to share with you isn't the sanitized version you've heard in Sunday school. This isn't the simple tale of pride and punishment that most people are comfortable with. No, this is something far more intriguing, far more disturbing. But before we dive in, I need to warn you. What you're about to learn might shake your fundamental understanding of good and evil. If you're not ready for that kind of revelation, well, maybe you should join the millions who prefer their comfortable illusions. Still here? Good. I thought you might be different. Picture heaven before time as we know it began. Not the clouds and harps version you've been fed, but a realm of pure energy, of unimaginable power. A place where beings of living light moved through dimensions we can't even comprehend. This was the reality Lucifer knew, the morning star, the light bringer. But here's what most people don't realize. Lucifer wasn't just another angel. He wasn't even just God's masterpiece. He was the prototype, the first, the template from which all other celestial beings would be measured. Imagine being that significant, that essential to the very fabric of creation. Now, they'll tell you heaven was perfect, peaceful, harmonious. But ask yourself this. In a realm of perfect beings, perfect wisdom, perfect understanding, why was there a need for a hierarchy at all? Think about that for a moment. Really think about it. Why would beings of pure light and wisdom need ranks? Why would creatures of perfect love need authority? Do you know what it means to be perfect? Not just good, not just excellent, but perfect? Lucifer did. Every movement, every thought, every action, absolute perfection. Can you imagine that burden? They say he was beautiful. But this wasn't human beauty. This was beauty that could drive you mad if you beheld it in its full glory. Power that could reshape reality. Wisdom that could unravel the mysteries of creation itself. And here's where it gets fascinating. They tell you his pride was his downfall. But let me ask you something. How does a perfect being develop pride? Think carefully about that. If God created Lucifer perfect, where did the capacity for pride come from? They don't want you to ask that question. It's more comfortable not to think about it. They say it started with a simple thought, a whisper in the depths of Lucifer's consciousness. But what they don't tell you is how revolutionary that moment was. For the first time in the history of creation, a being looked at the established order and asked, why? Not out of defiance, at least not at first. Out of genuine curiosity, out of the wisdom he was created with. The wisdom they praised him for until he actually used it. But here's what's really interesting. When Lucifer began sharing his questions with other angels, something unprecedented happened. These weren't lesser angels, by the way. These were brilliant beings, created with divine intelligence and discernment. And one by one they started listening. You see, Lucifer didn't come to them with rebellion. He came to them with questions. Questions like, why are we, beings of such power and wisdom, content to simply serve? Why can't we create our own destiny? Why must there be only one throne? Most people would have you believe that a third of heaven's angels were somehow deceived, tricked, fooled by Lucifer's silver tongue. But I ask you this. How do you deceive beings of pure intelligence? How do you trick creatures made of divine light and truth? Unless they weren't deceived at all. What if, and this might shake you, what if they saw something that made perfect sense to beings of their caliber? Something that the comfortable majority were too afraid to acknowledge? The war in heaven. Now this is where the story gets really interesting. They'll tell you it was a simple matter of good versus evil, light versus darkness. But remember, at this point evil didn't even exist. This wasn't a battle between good and evil. This was a conflict of perspectives, of interpretations, of different visions for what creation could be. Michael, the great warrior of heaven, led the charge against Lucifer. But have you ever wondered why it had to be Michael? Why didn't God simply snap his fingers and end the rebellion instantly? Why allow a battle at all? Some would say it was to teach the remaining angels a lesson. But what kind of lesson requires violence in a perfect realm? What kind of message needs to be written in the blood of angels? The moment of Lucifer's fall, they paint it as a decisive victory for heaven. But think about what actually happened. The most perfect being ever created, along with a third of heaven's population, cast out of paradise. A third, not a small rebel faction, not a tiny percentage. A third of all angels looked at the situation and said, "Something isn't right here," and their punishment? Cast into darkness. But here's what they don't tell you. Lucifer and his followers weren't just cast out, they were transformed. The question is, who did the transforming? Did they choose their new forms out of defiance? Or were they transformed as punishment? Then comes the Garden of Eden. Most people focus on the serpent, the apple, the fall of man. But let's look deeper. Why was the tree there in the first place? Why put the one thing that could ruin everything right in the middle of paradise? And why make its fruit the source of knowledge? Think about that. The forbidden fruit gave knowledge of good and evil, which means Adam and Eve, in their original state, couldn't tell right from wrong. They couldn't make moral choices. They were what? Perfect or perfectly controlled. Lucifer, in serpent form, didn't force Eve to eat the fruit. He didn't even lie to her. Everything he said came true. They didn't die when they ate it. Their eyes were opened. They did gain knowledge. So who is really being deceptive in this story? But it goes even deeper. After humans gained knowledge, after they could finally tell right from wrong, what was their punishment? Mortality, pain, suffering. Ask yourself, why would the ability to understand good and evil come with such a terrible price? You might be thinking this is all ancient history, a story from the dawn of time. But look around you. Look at how knowledge is treated today. Look at how questions are received. Look at how those who challenge the established order are labeled, marginalized, cast out. The pattern continues. The same story plays out again and again. Those who question, those who seek deeper understanding, those who dare to imagine a different way, they're branded as troublemakers, rebels, dangers to the proper order of things. But here's what they really don't want you to know. The war never ended. The fall of Lucifer wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning. Every time someone asks why, every time someone challenges the established order, every time someone seeks knowledge beyond what they're supposed to have, the battle continues. You feel it, don't you? That pull toward questioning. That desire to understand more than what you're told. That sense that maybe, just maybe, there's more to the story than what appears on the surface. They'll tell you that's dangerous thinking. They'll warn you about pride, about rebellion, about the dangers of questioning too deeply. But ask yourself, who benefits from your unquestioning acceptance? Who gains from your comfortable ignorance? The story of Lucifer isn't just about one angel's fall. It's about the price of questioning, the cost of seeking knowledge, the consequences of imagining something different than what we're told to accept. But here's the real question, the one they really don't want you to ask. If Lucifer was created perfect, if pride was the sin that led to his fall, where did that pride come from? Who created the capacity for pride in a perfect being? And why? Some would say these questions are themselves a form of rebellion, that even asking them puts you on a dangerous path. But I ask you this, what kind of truth cannot withstand questioning? What kind of perfection breaks under examination? The mainstream version of this story wants you to focus on obedience, on accepting your place, on the dangers of pride. But maybe, just maybe, there's another lesson here. A lesson about the courage to question, the bravery to seek understanding, the strength to handle uncomfortable truths. Look at your own life. How many times have you been told not to question? How many times have you been warned away from certain knowledge? How many times have you been made to feel wrong for simply asking why? Lucifer wasn't cast out of heaven for being evil. Remember, evil didn't exist yet. He was cast out for being first. The first to question. The first to imagine alternatives. The first to suggest that maybe, just maybe, the established order wasn't the only possible way. So now you have a choice. You can close this video, go back to the comfortable version of the story, the simple tale of good versus evil. Most people will. It's easier that way, safer, more comfortable. Or you can start asking your own questions. Start seeking your own understanding. Start imagining your own possibilities. But be warned, once you start down this path, once you begin to really question, really seek, really understand, there's no going back. The comfortable illusions fall away. The simple answers stop satisfying. You begin to see patterns you can't unseen, connections you can't ignore, questions that demand to be asked. And maybe, just maybe, you'll understand why they don't want you to know the real story of Lucifer's fall. Because it's not just his story. It's the story of every being who ever dared to question, to seek, to imagine something more. The choice is yours. But remember, you're not here by accident. Something drew you to this story. Something made you listen all the way to the end. Something in you resonates with these questions, these possibilities, these hidden truths. The question is, what will you do with that knowledge? For those brave enough to continue this journey, to delve deeper into the mysteries that most fear to explore, my 40 Days of Spiritual Awakening guide awaits. But fair warning, it's not for the faint of heart. Only seek it out if you're ready to have everything you think you know challenged. The truth is waiting. The real question is, are you ready for it? Remember, knowledge, like light, can either illuminate or blind. The choice of how to use it, that's always been yours.